so good,
job.
keeping me straight. Okay, record. Now we're recording, everybody. All right. Meredith, that presentation was called what? You sent it to me in
Gmail. It's called Low Incidence Disabilities.
I know how to drive.
Michelle, are you arguing with your daughter?
I was 30 feet from stopping, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you better stop! You're gonna wreck us! You're gonna kill us!"
Sometimes we do argue with our daughters, don't we?
So did you see the expression?
No, I heard her response.
Okay. Okay.
We all heard her response. I think we got it recorded too. So.
My goodness. Okay.
Okay, let's see now. I'm going to try to share this now.
Yes.
I think I've got it. Hang on. Oh, I know the problem here. I've got to drag this over. I got to drag this over just a second. Sorry, y'all.
Well, I guess I'll share my educational background while we're doing that.
Yeah, do that. Okay. If this is just a link, how do I open that? I can't drag it.
Click
I mean,
the
how do I
link.
share it?
Click the link into your, it should pop up in your Google.
It should pop up in my Google.
It should pop up on the screen and you should be able to share that screen.
It should pop up in my Google.
Click the link and make it come up.
I clicked the link and I see it.
Great.
Oh,
So when you hit share screen.
Share it now there. No, I don't want to send it to someone. Hang on. I don't know why you young people don't just do a PowerPoint like we used to do. Just do a PowerPoint like we used to do.
I'm sorry, I sent a Google Slides.
Okay.
It's been good with moving from place to place. I have so many of my presentations on my Google. I don't have to find it on a jump drive. We were so close.
Okay.
Well, I did go ahead and get my special education undergraduate from Texas Women's University. Had a really positive experience there. I went and got my master's.
Can y'all see this
in
now?
Special education? Yes.
Okay, good.
In special education with a focus in autism spectrum disorders. That is what my classroom focus has been. You can, present. These awesome Zoom meetings when I did my master's online 6 years ago. And I am actually going back to school this fall to work on my PhD at Texas State University. So I am headed back to school myself. Okay, so that was a picture of my family. My husband actually graduated with his bachelor's from Texas State. And I have two boys, Wesley and Wyatt, who are 10 and 13 at this point. So thankfully, I was going to give y'all a brief look into a self-contained classroom, but it sounds like many of y'all have been there. You've done that, and I'm sure you did it very well. To stick with it year after year, we know is very challenging. And
Meredith, do a quickie for the people who have not worked in a life skills classroom. Just do a quickie of that. Okay. Okay.
So I've worked in where it looks many different ways. I have had 7 to 10 students where in elementary setting where I do 100% of their academics. We would go out for general education recess and PE, art and music electives type of out class. We would also try to go to the lunchroom for lunch for that type of inclusion, but I was 100% of their academics. And I've done that elementary for 7 years. Middle school, I did a little bit of a shared environment where another teacher and I split the academics, and I did science and math for a little bit wider variety of students, and our students pass back and forth, but just between our two classes. It can sometimes give students just a little bit of variety in their day. It can be a little bit less planning on a self-contained teacher's part. If you're prepping for all the subjects, it is very challenging. And so to prep for a slightly less, but we know that within the self-contained settings, that can be an incredibly wide range of abilities, all the way down from students 6 to 12-month cognitive level, orthopedic impairments, vision and hearing impairments, all the way to students who are what we consider fairly high functioning, somewhat verbal, students with still low incidence disabilities, but potentially autism, Down syndrome, etc. And so you can have students all like that, all in one classroom. And that is, we know, very, very challenging. In the high school setting, we did a full switching 7 periods a day across 4 life skills teachers that we were kind of in a pod. And so we kind of, the teacher assistants or paraprofessionals would move them around. Again, we still had a lot of prep, and we had a lot of subjects that we covered because we were teaching 9th grade through post-secondary classes. And I have always been up for a challenge. Always, when things got easy, I tended to move settings. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it's really resulted in me being able to go to the Texas Education Agency, have a wide variety of experiences, and speak to a lot of different types of settings. So self-contained can look different, a lot of different ways. One pro tip I will give y'all is not to, life skills is a pretty general term, but don't refer to any specific type of acronym that you have within your district and assume that people will know what you're saying. We know as life skills teachers, sometimes they think we're teaching home economics, but if you say I teach an SLC or a DLS or an FAC, and that makes total sense to you, that's the acronym you've used for 5 or 10 years, outside of your district, they have no idea what you're talking about.
Good point.
So I have a few pictures from my classroom in the next slide. Just trying to speak to a few of the topics that y'all are working on. Okay, so this is from my most recent high school classroom, one of my students there. And so I've always done usually some version of stations. Sometimes those are individualized if my students are going to be staying with me for the majority of the time. And sometimes those are more generic stations because a lot of different kids. This year was one of my favorite years. We had students individualize their stations. This student really in particular loved dogs and just was thrilled to pieces about this. It's a towel just put up on the wall, and he would touch it all day and he would smile at it all day. And it was just a fun way to personalize his area. We see right here, I have the elements of a discrete trial training. I have his data sheets there where I will be sitting across from him and doing that ABA style discrete trial training. We also have behavior visuals. Right underneath his name, we had a behavior step-by-step strategy because the student acted out physically a lot. Within, if you kind of move your Zoom screens so that you can see the bins in the back, he was up to a 4-bin system that he could do, bring it down, work on it, complete it, put it back up. And we didn't have space. We didn't have space for him to move it to the side like you would do in a true teaching program where you go left to right, bring it down to a bin. But he would put it back up to the top, I don't know if y'all have a personal pet peeve, but I didn't ever have my students break down their work. We found that students who had been taught to immediately break down their work had a hard time in a work setting. When they went to, a post-secondary or a in high school job, you don't want people to automatically undo all the work that they've done. I see some nods and I love it because we're agreed across the state. I think that y'all are aware of errorless learning. I would always do that a lot when I was doing a direct teach. I would, in my elementary years, I would teach a lot around, a half circle table, a kidney table. And we would just really reinforce those correct responses with one choice. So I'm sure y'all have seen examples of errorless learning and which one's the pin. You got one choice. You touch the pin, great job. You got it. And so they get used to that immediate reinforcement of verbal praise or whatever reinforcer you're going to give them, an edible reinforcer. I was told a lot of times that my big facial expressions were a reinforcer. They thought that my mouth was like really big and expressive, and just seeing my face be very happy and excited for them to make a right answer was a reinforcer in itself. That does not work for everybody. Sometimes you have to have M&Ms, etc. But lots of use of visuals. And again, reinforcers. My reinforcers were absolutely constant. And one thing that I really started to do when I had these individualized stations is we had individualized reinforcer menus that I loved and were super successful. So students who always ask to bounce on the red ball, you have a dry erase board. When they ask to bounce on the red ball, you cross it off, and next time you need to choose something else. And so we got a lot of students going on long walks that way, getting exercise in. We found a lot of really weird and unique reinforcers, but their parents were always like, there's only this one thing that makes them happy, and if we leave it at home or if it breaks or something, we're totally out of luck. And so we were like, let's spread that repertoire of reinforcers so that more than one thing is the thing right now. So I definitely could talk literally like a semester on reinforcers, so I'll just leave it at that. So the next slide will be more pictures from my classroom. Okay, so this was one of our visual schedules that we used. The middle pieces, the colored pieces, were Velcro that they pulled off and moved to the all done. Again, I had students who could read at high school level, and I didn't really before then. So we had a lot of pictures, a lot of real pictures. You're going to be at the book station. We have a picture of a book, and they would tear that off. But in this setting, I was really thankful and lucky to have all readers by the time I got to secondary setting. So again, you see a very tight schedule, 20-minute breakdown generally to keep things going, and never getting bored, always having lots of work to do, so that, as we know, life skills teachers, that's a ton of prep, that's a ton of setup every single day. But I think it's really worth it for it to, move smoothly through the day. So on the other side of the screen, this was actually something I had posted in my room, which was my prompt hierarchy. At first, when I was making this, it looked really small and I didn't want y'all to have to squint to see them. So I listed the prompt hierarchy, and I had this right above one of our one-to-one workstations, because immediately my very well-meaning paraprofessionals would very frequently go to the physical prompt right away. I'll give you the answer, or let me help you with your hand. Like, very well-meaning, very wonderful, skilled professionals, but they were quick to go to that physical prompt to get the activity done. And so I posted this right where the student wasn't looking at it, but they were looking at it right behind the student. And I wanted them, if they were doing a physical prompt, I wanted them to be able to move to a less invasive prompt. And so it's going physical prompt, modeling the behavior you want to see, and then just a gestural prompt, just a point. Only using the verbal when the verbal is needed, and then being able to use a picture prompt would be the least intrusive. And then the best would be to have a checklist or a series of visuals that you don't even have to point or walk the student through, that you can walk away entirely and they can walk through that independently. But you don't see that a lot in kindergarten. It's self-contained. But I was, in self-contained, a lot of times we have students year after year. And so you get to see that amazing growth. You have students kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth. I mean, I was not able to stay anywhere for 7-8 years, like some of y'all, to see that many years of growth, but even just 4 years is incredible. And is great being able to see what less and less prompts we're having to use. We can go on to the next one. Oop, that's weird.
Is that the next one? Or did we miss one?
Go back one, let me double check.
There.
I might have done something weird with the pictures, but there we go.
Well,
Okay.
hang on. We did that one.
Again, if y'all have been in a self-contained setting, you're very familiar. Oh,
Am I messed up on my slides here?
maybe go back 2. There should be the inclusion one, and there should be one before that that has a behavior data sheet. There we go.
Hang on.
Ugh. Okay.
Hang on. That one right there?
Oh, you guys love technology. Okay, go. There we go. Maybe it'll stay. Okay. This was a behavior data sheet that a friend of mine, teacher friend of mine, we know we have to share resources, shared with me, and I loved it. This was for when I was professionally blogging for the Autism Helper. And so we had to leave a lot of things out to be able to put it on the internet. So this obviously doesn't have any names. It doesn't have any consequences on it, but this is set up with antecedent, behavior, and consequence in columns. So you're doing ABC data collection very purposefully. So many times when I was an early teacher, I would just take behavior data without antecedent data, and it doesn't give you a lot to go off of to improve the behaviors if you don't know what came before. So great. I have that they hit 100 times in a day, but what can we do to fix that? This was a really helpful change for me to be able to, and I hate that it says nothing on there. Nothing, there's a nothing option for an antecedent. And I would say instead of nothing, it would be unknown, because there is always a reason for a behavior. We just might not be able to interpret it, but behaviors always have antecedents and they always have a reason for that behavior.
You ready?
But behavior data collection really was the biggest thing that I learned in my undergraduate that I took to my classroom. And I told my professor that many times when I would see her at events, conferences and things, that the data collection sheets that I got there, I took into the field and was very helpful, because I like the different data collection types that y'all are going over in your text, because they're, a frequency, an interval, all of that is good in the right moment. And you really just want to pick the one that gives you the best picture of the behavior. And sometimes you just got to pick what's going to give you improvement. I used to take data that was kind of a time sampling, and it told me that the students acted out during 7 out of 7 periods in a day, every day, forever. And but if when we had to look at a total frequency count, and it showed me that this is an honest situation, that originally he was hitting upwards of 1,000 times in a day. And we were able to get that down to 500, 250. He may still have been hitting during 7 periods of the day. If we were looking at it like that, then we never saw any improvement. But going from 1,000 to 50, we needed to find a way to do the data that we saw improvement.
It's good.
Just my personal anecdote. Okay, we can go on to the next one.
Okay.
So another setting that we're going to serve students is inclusion. If you were to go back one, just so that y'all can see my student named Sarah. We're just gonna have this issue.
Here we go.
Again.
Here we go.
She was performing in the musical, the High School Musical. They did Once Upon a Mattress. She's in the green dress, smiling, holding her pom-pom, looking the right direction and singing her words. And during periods of the day, she was completely laid out in the middle of the hallway, screaming and rolling around. And thankfully, choir and a musical setting was amazing. We were able to generalize her checklist that we would have in our classroom. We would make sure that we had a very similar setup for her in her choir. We would have the same visuals. The paraprofessional would take the same set of visuals. And then sometimes we would have unique reinforcers because we really needed this to work. And so that would be the only time of the day she got like half a soda. This is a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl where, I try to look at it as if the general education students have access to a soda at lunch, it is a reasonable reinforcer that they would have, access to a soda similarly. We wouldn't necessarily be pouring big cups of Coke for a kindergartner whose peers don't have access to that. But this was just an amazing example of inclusion to me. Her entire group, I have pictures of her in 3 different musicals. Unfortunately, the last musical was did not end up happening because of COVID, her senior year, but I have pictures of her in 3 different musicals. It went incredibly well. And to me, inclusion is so incredibly worth the work. And it's not always done in art, music, PE. It's done in a variety of ways. We had students who were really great on computers. And so we worked them into a technology class. It really just looks different for every student to look at what their strengths are and what it makes the most sense for. We were blessed at a very large high school to have a very large range of classes. We had a robotics class. One of our students went there and would work on Legos and was building and tinkering along with other students who were doing robotics and winning international championships at it. But he was able to sit beside them and have a wonderful inclusion experience. And as y'all know, inclusion looks very different for different students, but students from a life skills or low incidence setting, sometimes it takes a little extra work. It takes a little extra creativity. So moving on from there. Okay, and I was really blessed to do a lot of community-based instruction. We had a job at the Westlake Athletic Center, Community Center. And so we had students who were rotating across different jobs. We had this posted and they would check to see what their job was for that day. And then I know that this was an element of your text, was talking about self-instruction and self-monitoring. This self-monitoring sheet was kind of how they graded themselves for the day. And yeah, with some students, we had to completely walk through this with them. But they were able to say, they did a good job, yes or no, one of those, do we do a good job? Yes or no? And they, sometimes they'll be honest and no, I didn't do a good job. I didn't complete my job. I didn't try my best. So we tried to give it more in their hands of like, did I earn my reward? Did I earn my pay for the day? Which was, a variety of things, reinforcers. So Community-based instruction is just an awesome opportunity for students to generalize skills. We would do a lot of the work ahead of time, practicing those same tasks, and then generalizing the skill into the community-based setting. And again, that's being creative. Hopefully your schools have transition specialists that are able to make some of those connections in the community for you. Because it's a lot of legwork to find places that are happy to have you. But once you make those connections, you can, hold tight to them. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so some of the research-based practices that I believe y'all read about this week, just touching on those. And so joint attention, a lot of these we are doing and we don't realize we're doing. Even me with, years under my belt, I had to kind of Google, like, what is an example? I had to Google story-based and I was like, oh, you're talking about social stories. Okay. What is story-based setting? But with joint attention, I have always loved using joint attention, whether it's getting down on the ground and, with littler students, play-based. One of my favorite stories as far as joint attention is with a student that I actually work with in respite now. I still miss my students, and so I do some volunteering on the side. I do some respite care in home, just because I really do love this population and I don't want to live the rest of my days without having them enriching my life. So joint attention, I have a particular student that I work with in home who is nearly 30 herself. She's minimally verbal. She really only speaks in Disney quotes, but I happen to be a Disney aficionado, have been my entire life. And I was able to kind of complete the quote. She wasn't talking to me. She was doing her own thing with her own quotes in her own world. And I kind of interjected. I forced myself into the joint attention and finished one of her quotes. And she looked at me like it was the first time she looked at me like, oh, there's another person here. And I kind of interjected myself into her world and we made a connection and we've been very connected, very good friends since then. And, we'll do different types of games having to do with Disney, having to do with quotes and characters and all types of things. And it really just comes down to interjecting yourself into their world and trying to find a connection no matter what that might be. And story-based, we talked about social stories, which if you're in a life skills or autism classroom, you're using them absolutely all the time. This particular social story that I bought, I made, I laminated, and I made 3 copies of, and was for one of my particular students who could not handle substitutes particularly. And when that person was gone, they were like, I cannot be at school because Miss Walling is not here. Something's not okay. So the pages go through, it has my face in it. It has a lot of her reinforcers in it. We made one for her home. We made one for school, and we made one for her inclusion settings so that no matter where we were, we could go through this. And if I knew I was going to be out, sometimes I would, call her mom and say, go ahead and go through the story because she's going to be upset when she gets to school. So again, that's a lot of legwork, but it's improved behaviors and improved outcomes for students, and it's worth it. And then that cognitive behavior therapy is done a lot with students who are on the autism spectrum. These are all kind of autism research-based practices. Students who are higher functioning, it has a lot to do with abstract thought, being able to name our feelings, identify our feelings, and work through that. And so I've seen it done with students in life skills. We had a particular student who was very intimidating. 250, 300 pound guy, full beard, and would get crying and very upset, very loud. And we used to say, are you sad? Are you mad? Or whatever it is. And he was usually able to verbalize what he was feeling, usually sad. And we would say, let's ball it up and we're going to toss it in the trash. And so he would, we talk about it. This is what you're feeling, and that's okay. But we're done with it now. We're going to ball it up and we're going to toss it in the trash. And that worked so many times. Even worked in the community when I was like, oh, this is going downhill. This is going to be a scene with this guy who's 6 feet tall and I'm 5'2". But working through those emotions really worked with him. But that's going to be kind of on a case by case, looking at cognitive level, looking at emotional intelligence. And that is not always going to be something that you're able to employ, but it's research based and definitely worth a try. Okay, go. Okay, so this was part of the discussion I had with your professor, how we might support teachers from various roles. And when I got my master's, I didn't know where I was going to go next. It's probably my rebellious daughterness that I was like, I am not going to be a diagnostician. I will not do that. That is not my path. But I could picture myself as probably a special ed administrator, which actually never ended up happening for me. I went straight from the classroom to TEA. But these are kind of things that I wish I had had that level of support from a campus administrator or a district administrator, and things that worked with my diagnosticians along the way. So I kind of broke it down by role. And I apologize that I talk a million miles a minute. I'm trying to keep people's attention in my personal classroom experience. So as a campus administrator, I have had this done really well and less than favorably. Just overall creating a climate of inclusion, making the point to know your self-contained students' names. There are often students who are walking around not during passing period or not during your regular movement within the building. And so I've had many principals who would be spending some time in the hallway, and they would be able to come across and build rapport with my students, and knowing their names, knowing their interests, and really encouraging that inclusion from the top down. If you don't have campus level support, you're not going to be able to work through those sticky moments with the incredibly competitive choir director who is from Juilliard and does not necessarily want your students singing off key. And so when it's from the top down, it's more of an expectation. So if you are in that administrator role with a background in special ed, that's a win. And you're going to be able to create that climate of inclusion. As y'all being self-contained teachers know, planning periods are few and far between, if ever. That's a joke. You always have students in your room. But I have a dream that self-contained teachers someday will get planning periods. And I'll tell you from a TEA perspective, when we are brought into situations where there's any problems, we look into that. We look into, do they have common planning with grade level? Do they have common planning with other subjects, people that share the same subject matter? Do they have common planning with other life skills teachers? And if there's any way to make that master schedule work. And I have had really creative things. I've had at times my assistant principal come in and cover my class so I can have a planning. I've had the paraprofessional who usually covers the copy room take a period and come cover my class while they do a very minimal expectation activity, and just really getting creative with the coverage and really just prioritizing planning for all teachers. Special ed life skills teachers didn't sign up to do more work than everybody else. I mean, I know we do, but we did pursue degrees. We should be treated on the same level that the other teachers on our campus. are, and given the same professional courtesies. Providing alternative professional development opportunities is a pet subject of mine. When there's like a campus-wide something that no matter how hard you try cannot apply to your students, giving the opportunity to work within your small group, having the opportunity to maybe that day in January or May, they get to go to the service center, or they get to work with other teachers in the district. In one of the districts I was in, Northwest ISD, shout out, we had district-wide PLCs every 6 weeks. So every life skills self-contained teacher, once every 6 weeks, had an entire day where we got subs and we worked together and planned together and collaborated and learned from each other. And it was, those teachers are still my best teacher friends because we actually saw each other and we got to go to lunch and got to enjoy all of those benefits of planning together. So that those alternative professional development opportunities, whether that's in the district, on the campus, or maybe it's at the region, maybe it's, thank the Lord, we have webinar options. You can get really high level webinars from amazing universities across the nation now. And if you're like, I cannot apply this, writing plan that y'all have. My favorite thing, anecdotal, was when a person running the professional development came over to me and she said, well, I said, my students do not write. My students are completely nonverbal. They do not write. And she said, well, if you gave them a pencil, what would they do with it? And I said, 100% they're gonna put it in their mouth. 100%. And she just looked at me like, she just dumbfounded and she walked away. And I was like, so can I leave now? On a 1 to a 9 scale. I'm gonna really I need something else. I'm gonna have to talk faster if possible, but coordinating mentorship opportunities, pairing teachers up with more experienced teachers. And I definitely think that the less experienced teachers who are just out of college can teach our established teachers a lot about technology, about all sorts of apps and online resources. So those mentorship opportunities, when you pair up a newer and an older teacher, are beneficial for both. I kind of talked about that master's schedule already, and embracing campus-wide initiatives. That was my little picture in the corner that's blocked by your Zoom screens probably, was when we developed a campus-wide coffee business, and our principal, who did not drink coffee, just asked us to deliver him a cup of water every day because he wanted to be a part of the campus-wide business. And I said, you're gonna pay me $5 a week for a water? And he was like, yes, I am, because I want to see their faces in my office. And so he absolutely did not drink a lick of caffeine, but was like, I'm going to be a part of this initiative. And it was really, really awesome to see. So we'll go quickly to district-wide, which have a lot of the same things. If you want to go to the next slide.
Sure.
Just one. Okay. Again, I'm harping on planning periods. As a district person, you may not have a lot of control, but just be in their ear, be another voice for that. Again, mentorship, professional development, that district-wide PLC that I talked about. That was some budget. Speak up for that in the budget, substitutes for professional development, PLC periods. And this is where your district-wide people are really going to be access to high-quality curriculum. The fact that as life skills teachers, so often we are asked to write the curriculum from the ground up or find it on Teachers Pay Teachers is just not okay. Advocating for high quality curriculum has to come from, often a higher level than a teacher. I mean, we can ask and hope, wish, but thankfully, due to technology, downloads and things, a lot more things are available without buying a gigantic, huge, box of things. The Unique Learning has a lot of online opportunities, and I will say the Autism Helper has a lot of incredible curriculums. I didn't help one bit writing those, but I used them a lot because I was blogging with her and I had free access to them. I personally have used her functional literacy, and
And the Autism Helper
they're
is a
awesome. So-
website, right?
Yes, theautismhelper.com.
Okay.
If hopefully y'all know Sasha, she's awesome. And I've been blessed to work with her and know her for, I don't know, 10 years or so now. If you Google that, you can find some of my old blog posts, but I don't moonlight doing that anymore. If y'all are going into hoping to become a diagnostician, definitely getting to know your caseload students before it's time to assess if you want those more authentic results. A lot of times we do utilize, as a teacher, I was utilized a lot to, kind of help facilitate testing. But if you are always coming in when it's time for a fire drill, if you're coming in on Fun Friday, if there's a cooking project, you're coming in because you have an extra 15 minutes. Like, that's just an awesome time to get to know students so that it's not the first time they've seen you, and making sure that, you're just a presence. You're a known person.
That's good.
We know as teachers, we would love a lot of notices when we're needing to do different rating scales for FIEs, or if we're, preparing paperwork for ARDS. One thing I wanted to note was providing and highlighting instructional and educational implications in FIEs. I don't know how long I was into my teaching career that I even knew that the skilled diagnosticians and LSSPs, other professionals doing those assessments, were writing up instructional implications. I was like, I could have been reading this for tips, but when I look at an FIE and it's 30 or 40 pages long, I'm like, I don't have time for that. But if a diagnostician would have said, hey, read this paragraph, this is what it would be, a great thing, instructional implication for you to know. I just wish I had gotten there 5, 6, 7 years earlier. But that would be an awesome place to go from. And, you can potentially write goals from that. I mean, ideally we're writing goals from our FIEs, right? Definitely providing a second set of eyes on present levels, on goals, on state assessment, transition. I had the rude awakening of going from the Metroplex, where we have skilled diagnosticians, to going to the Austin area, where they do not have diagnosticians. They hire LSSPs, who are fabulous professionals, but they just do the testing side like every 3 years. Other than that, we ran our ARDS, we did the paperworks, we sent the notices. I was like, how do you write an IEP from absolute scratch? I know how to write goals, I know how to write PLAFs, I know how to write a transition supplement, but writing a goal from absolute nothing, writing delibs, running the ARD from be thankful for your diagnosticians if you have them. I definitely did not appreciate mine at the time as much as I should have, because I did not realize all of the background work they were doing to prepare for all of those meetings. But if you are going to go into the field as a diagnostician, just provide that extra set of eyes. If you're reading through a PLAF and you're really not getting a good view of the student, let them know, get in there a few days ahead of time. If these goals don't seem measurable to you, they're not going to seem measurable to TEA. And so just professional courtesy, like let's glance back over those before we put them into, legal paperwork, and now we're in a bind. Definitely state assessment decisions and those STAR-ALT requirements, and then all the elements of the transition supplement would definitely benefit from a second set of eyes. Recommending different places call it different things, pre-ARDing or holding a staffing. As a diagnostician, if you know this is going to be really messy, you've had some back and forth with the parents, like get everybody on board and let them know, like, this is going to be a doozy. This is, where we're at with things, so that nothing is a surprise except for what the parent or the advocate brings in. So I don't think we're going to get to all of my awesome TEA stuff tonight.
Is that your last
but
slide there?
You can invite me back.
Yeah.
That's not, it's not the last slide at all, but it's sparing them all my boring TEA stuff.
So is this the last? Oh, wait, there you go. Okay, but I think we're about out of time, aren't we? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Meredith, you were going to talk to us about some accountability issues, but I do think we're out of time. And so we will have to do that. You know what I think we will do? Most of the people in this class are in the diagnostician program. And so I may have you back in the fall to speak to the diagnosticians about some accountability issues. Okay. I think that would be
sounds good.
A fun thing to do, and just have you maybe talk to us about the accountability side and what TEA is looking for in a desk audit and some things like that. So we'll get to that at a future time. I'd like to, for a minute, throw it open to anybody that maybe has been a life skills teacher or has worked with a population of students with significant cognitive disabilities. What do you have to add to what Meredith has said, or any questions that we might have that would benefit everybody? Anybody? Nobody?
I just found myself laughing a lot at the things that she was saying, because it's so true. Like, it's like, yep, I thought that. Yep, I've said that.
Yeah.
So.
What I was thinking throughout was
we are very similar, and as crazy as the experiences are, they're often shared.
Oh yeah.
But I wonder, what does our undergrad program really prepare us for as special educators? I don't think very much. I wondered, as I was listening to you, Meredith, how much of that learning did you get from your undergraduate program? At one point, you answered some of that when you said that some of the behavior paperwork that you got really helped you. But, I think back to,
and I had fabulous professors. Great.
Yeah. And I did too, but I didn't take very much of what I learned into the field. A lot of what I took into my first classroom was learned on the job, by the seat of my pants. And I wasn't teaching in a life skills classroom, which I think I would have probably panicked if I had been. I certainly wouldn't have known all the things that you have presented to us today. I wouldn't have known about, taking data with a frequency chart and, some of these kinds of things, visual schedules. And it seems simple when you explain it, but I wouldn't have known to do a lot of it. I didn't learn that, even though I was in a special ed undergrad program. That wasn't taught to me. And I was thinking, I went through a program that was for generic special education. But prior to that certification, there were certifications for each of the individual disabilities. And way back in the old days, when special ed first became a thing, you got a certification for learning disabilities. You got a certification for what back then we called mental retardation. You got a certification, well, actually they called it minimal brain injury. You got a certification for a specific disability. And so some old certificates for people that are probably aged out of the system now, older than me, you would have a certificate to teach a particular disability category. And then by the time I came around, you got a generic special education certificate. And I'm sure that's what most of you, if you have a certificate from a university, if you got a degree, you would have one that's generic in nature. But these days, so many people teach special education who've never had any coursework in special ed. You get a teaching certificate and or you get a degree, and then you go back oftentimes and add special ed as a certificate without having any coursework in special education. And so many people have no real training in special education, but oftentimes the training that we've had doesn't prepare us to teach the populations that we end up teaching. So I go back and forth on how much value there is in an undergraduate degree in special education, because I'm not sure, how much I've used mine. A lot of it is, like I say, by the seat of our pants. So I go back and forth on the value of that. A lot of it is on the job training. And I think Meredith and some of the others of you would say that what you learned in the field, you learned from other good teachers.
Yeah.
You've learned, online from resources that you've pulled, things like that. So we'll take some of
Learning
that
from
and
your paraprofessionals.
yes,
Learning from your paraprofessionals. Very, very much. I would not have survived without learning from my paraprofessionals.
so true.
And also learning the regional service center, I will say, almost all of those things I got in early trainings from Jill Varley or Regional 11.
Me too.
Yeah. So the structured learning classroom, and that was the first time that I got a crash course in being a self-contained teacher. And thankfully, the regional service centers do have autism specialists, low incisibility specialists, and then there's cohorts and things you can join with EA, where you can join a learning community on a level. But those regional service centers are top notch.
That's a really good endorsement, Meredith. Thank you for adding that.
I made my aides go through that structured novice as well.
That's good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out tonight. Let's do our bonus question this week. Let's see, our bonus question this week, I think, Meredith, let's say we're the name of the high school where Meredith taught most recently, okay? And that's Westlake High School. One word, Westlake, Westlake. So my question on the test is going to be the name of the school where our guest speaker taught most recently. You don't need to put high school, just put one word, Westlake, one word, Westlake. And if you got last week's bonus question wrong because you put too many words, or you didn't have a word in there that you needed to have, send me a message about that and I'll go back in and correct it for you. We don't want anybody to miss their question because they didn't have all the right words just so. So let me know if that happened to you. So our answer to our bonus question this week is Westlake. And we tried to incorporate, Meredith and I put our heads together before tonight to try to get some of the answers for this week's quiz embedded in our lecture tonight. So hopefully that'll help you out with this week's quiz. Make sure you've read your chapters though. All of the answers are there. And hopefully we touched on some of them as well in tonight's lecture. I hope you enjoyed that little snapshot of my grandsons, and this time with my firstborn. And I'm very proud of her and thankful for her time with us tonight. So girls, thanks for your time and attention this evening. And if you have any questions or needs, let me know. I'm around, so you can text me or call me or send me an email. And I'll look forward to seeing y'all next week. Okay.
All righty.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Meredith.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.